Hello and welcome to the season 2 of Sustainability 100 Plus. Today, we are hosting another masterclass on an eminent topic, why partnerships are important in water stewardship. We have an eminent guest today, Nabia Ofosu Ama, who is Senior Corporate Engagement Advisor, Global Water at the Nature Conservancy. Nabia focuses on the development and implementing the strategy for engaging companies to further TNC's global water goals and also serves as the relationship manager for a few TNC's relationships with key Fortune 500 companies. Prior to TNC, she was associated with Global Environment Technology Foundation, where she managed public-private partnerships in water, including the Coca-Cola Company's $65 million Replenish Africa initiatives and programs with the US Agency for International Development, Diageo, and Water Health International. Welcome, Nabia. We are excited to have you today.
Thank you so much, Sugandha. Happy to be here.
We have 5 questions for you today and look forward for your insights on them. So without further ado, let's begin with the first question. Nabia, what does partnerships mean to you?
Great, thank you for that question. And I'll speak here a little bit on behalf of the Nature Conservancy and what we think about partnerships as being important with our focus on environmental conservation and water stewardship. So for us as a global environmental nonprofit, we're based in the United States, but we work in about 70 countries around the world. We really believe that partners from different sectors of society really need to be involved in this environmental conservation work in order for us to solve, the world's biggest challenges. So that should be NGOs like us, it should be companies like AB InBev, government agencies, local communities. All of those different partners from across those different sectors are really needed because they bring different perspectives, different strengths. They have different opportunities that are available to them to help us solve these challenges that really need multiple approaches for them to be addressed. Also thinking about the scale of the challenges that we face. So when we talk about water stewardship, this is something that people are seeing in many, many communities around the world. It's really a global challenge that we're experiencing right now in terms of too much water. So whether that be flooding that we're seeing or too little water, people not having access to water in certain places, historic droughts that we're seeing around the world as well. So these are very large challenges. And also these are challenges that need to be solved quickly, right? We need speed to be able to address these as well. So we need many different people working on them. Partnerships are really important, but we also need to think about how can we kind of evolve our partnerships to be deeper and to be more open and sharing. So at TNC, we think about an ideal partnership as one where those partners are bringing their strengths. So thinking about, if we're a corporation, we might know more about finance or supply chains. If we're a nonprofit, we might know more about the science elements. So bring those strengths to the partnership and how can we complement each other. But then also speaking openly about our weaknesses. What aren't we doing as well? Where might we need to do better? How can we continually push each other to do better? And we found this sort of open partnership with AB InBev at a global level as well, where we have that kind of open communication. We have mutual trust. We're focusing on continuous improvement. And that's really what partnerships mean to us as TNC.
That's amazing, Nabia, for sharing the insights on how and where this different stakeholder perspectives also comes into the picture. So moving on to the next question, how do you think that partnerships can drive the water stewardship agenda specifically?
Great, yes. So for the water stewardship agenda, I talked a little bit in my last answer about some of the water challenges that we're facing globally, too much water, too little water. But we also think about water stewardship as it relates to companies and other actors who are using water for different purposes, and think about water stewardship as using water in a way that is socially and culturally equitable, that's environmentally sustainable, that's economically beneficial. And that stewardship is achieved through a stakeholder inclusive process that happens both at a site, so at the location where that entity is using the water, but then also within the broader catchment or within the broader watershed where that water is coming from. So because of that, and because of the fact that water is really a shared resource, it's not, we have different individuals who are using water, but it's coming from a different place. Other people are stewards of that water, of that land. It may be then flowing downstream after that individual or that entity has used it, and others are impacted. So it really does take multiple stakeholders coming together to think about how to best steward and manage the water resources that we're using. And sometimes when
Absolutely.
people think about water stewardship, they think about that site. So I mentioned kind of where you're using that water directly. But because of that need to kind of go out further into the catchment, partnerships can really help drive water stewardship. It's really critical to think about both what you're doing in your facility, inside the four walls of where you operate, but then also who you might need to partner with outside to make sure that you're being a good steward of your water, definitely.
Absolutely. And also with respect to the scale, like, of course, with reaching out to the larger area, larger catchment base. So definitely, as you pointed out. Uh, any further examples that you can share which have actually brought in the change that we expected and partnership played a major role in that?
Yeah, well, I will say that AB InBev has a number of good examples within your system globally. And TNC has worked with you all. The World Wildlife Fund has also worked with you all in a number of places on water stewardship activities, and you have other partners in different places. With TNC in Latin America and AB InBev together, we've been working on partnerships that bring together different stakeholders on the ground and think about how to set up different governance mechanisms or financial mechanisms that could think about innovative ways to address water challenges. I know there's some really great work that's being done in Mexico right now. It also includes GIZ, thinking about farmers and how they are addressing or how they might be impacting water resources locally, and bringing in innovative finance to help farmers convert to more efficient irrigation and helping that to support improved water management. So really starting to be able to see in a location where there is a groundwater aquifer, it's being overdrawn, how you can use those incentives, those financial mechanisms to have a measurable impact with those communities to reduce the amount of water that's being used or to use water more efficiently. I think there have also been some other great examples of partnership in different places around the world. One that comes to mind is the California Water Action Collaborative. So that's in the state of California in the United States. There was a historic drought a number of years ago. And so a group of companies actually came together with some NGOs to think about, where are we located in this state? Where might we all be really dependent on water for crops that we're sourcing or for the facilities that we have? And can we come together through a collective action to identify some projects that we're all going to invest in to have a very fast response and meaningful impact as it relates to this drought? So we've seen that collaborative is still ongoing now. That drought in California continues to ebb and flow, but these companies are able to have an open dialogue and work together to identify locations where they can put in initiatives that are helping to address those water challenges. And then from a country scale, there's also the 2030 Water Resources Group, which is led with the World Bank and a number of companies as well, thinking about at a country scale, what sort of policy initiatives might we want to put in place? How can we use our influence as companies, but also as the World Bank working with different national entities to think about what policy changes might be made. And so there are different scales at which partnerships should be considered, really locally based on a specific challenge. You could think across a state level or kind of more regionally, and then thinking at a country level as well. And there are great examples of different initiatives that are trying to address that and thinking about the actual change that those are going to bring as well.
That's so amazing and so inspiring to see that there are actual real case example, real world examples of partnerships for people to learn from and even adopt so that a real change can be brought in, whether at a local or a community level. Moving on to our next question. So how do you think that the community, which is like at the forefront of the entire initiative, how do you think that they are going to be benefited at large through these partnerships?
Yeah, that's a great question. The From the community perspective, as I mentioned, communities are really critical stakeholders in this whole process. So really understanding what are the challenges that are occurring locally, how can different stakeholders, whether those be NGOs or corporations or multilateral agencies, engage to address the challenges that they're facing. So it does kind of depend on the local situation, what those benefits might be. But for TNC, we are thinking about these initiatives as related to water security. So how can you have a reliable flow of water, a consistent flow of water at good quality, and that your water supply is secure? And we think about multiple dimensions of water security as well. And these are some of the different ways that those communities might benefit. So it could be domestic water security, where people have that reliable and safe water at home, wherever they are. You can think about economic water security as well. So for that economy within that community, they have water to be able to sustain their economic growth, to produce food, to support their industries, to support energy. So those are some of the benefits the community might have when their water is secure. We also thinking about urban water security as well. So, cities are becoming, the place where almost the majority of the world's population is living now, and thinking about how we can have better water management services and have that water available in those cities where lots of people are. And then also environmental water security. So this is very important for us as the Nature Conservancy, obviously, having healthy rivers, healthy aquifers, having those ecosystems that can help to support our fisheries, other systems, and making sure that that environmental water is safe. And then finally, resilience as well. So when you have that stable supply of water, you can have those communities be resilient to adapt to change, if there's natural disasters, other potential issues that might come about when they have that supply of water locally. So I think there are many different ways that communities can benefit from these water initiatives and these partnerships. It depends on the challenges that they're facing, but we think about those different dimensions of water security overall as the benefits that we can see in these communities.
Yeah, and actually that's the common factor for all. Like that's the basis of the entire agenda for each of the communities, how it's gonna benefit them, how it's required. That's the purpose of doing it. Uh, so moving on to our last question, but not the very least. Uh, so what role does each stakeholder play? Like in the partnerships, as you called out many times, there are multiple stakeholders involved in the entire process and everyone has their role. So if you can specify how and where does each stakeholders can act and like be involved in the entire process. And is it just like these partnerships are just driven by the corporates or NGOs only, or is there any other stakeholders who have a major contribution in the entire dynamics?
Yes, I can definitely address this. So obviously there are many different roles that the stakeholders can play in these programs. And so I do think that in a lot of the partnerships that I've mentioned, corporates and NGOs are very critical in engaging in these partnerships and oftentimes kind of instigate the partnerships in a sense, identifying either places that are really important for biodiversity and conservation from a TNC perspective, or for a company, places that are really important for them for their business operations. But we often see this impetus coming from other places as well. So it could be a city saying, we have a water resource that we want to secure for our city, a local government who's interested in this. We also are seeing multilateral or bilateral agencies getting involved. So I mentioned GIZ as in that example as well, or thinking about like the African Development Bank is doing this work across Africa. So there are different partners who kind of take the lead, who initiate these programs. But oftentimes you are seeing for water stewardship specifically, corporations and NGOs starting it off and then bringing other partners to the table. As I mentioned, that's really critical. I think in terms of the different roles that these partners can play, we did talk about local communities. I think they're one of the most important stakeholders. And in terms of understanding how they're going to be stewards of that water, how they will steward the land where the water comes from, and also what are the challenges that are being faced locally. It really does take engaging from that perspective with local communities first to understand those challenges as well. And then we can also think about other private sector entities too, like water utilities or agricultural associations who are really engaged. And those sorts of entities can play the role of identifying ways that the water can better be managed, or identifying who are the right stakeholders needed to engage in these sorts of initiatives. There may also be different public sector entities like local governments or water authorities. So they might be really familiar with, what is the legal framework in this location? What sort of mechanisms could be set up to better incentivize protection of water? Sometimes we do work very closely with them as part of the partnership to set up an association or an individual organization for water management. So that sort of public sector engagement at a local level is really important. We often do engage with academics or research institutions as well. So when we talk about, AB InBev's goal for water stewardship is related to measurable improvement of water availability and or quality in the communities where you operate. So who's going to be doing that measurement? How do you make sure that you have the science basis and the research available to understand the change that you have made? So sometimes we're working with research institutions or universities in local areas who are helping us with that measurement work. And then I also mentioned buyer multilateral agencies who could bring in financing, who could bring in some innovation, some opportunities to draw examples from other locations where they may be working, and help to bring those initiatives to scale as well. So we do talk a lot in our partnerships about innovative financing, bringing these to scale, not just having it be a small pilot that's a one-off project, but something that can really be transformative and be scaled up to address issues, not just in a specific location, but regionally or even nationally. So the different stakeholders, as I talked about at the beginning, have different strengths, and trying to bring in, the NGOs that may be doing the work on the ground, the corporations that may have an interest in engaging, have some funding to bring to start off a project, those research institutions that can contribute with that measurement, the local communities, the local authorities. So there are really different roles of different stakeholders, but it's critical to find the best roles that each can play.
Amazing. And thank you for the detailed response on this one, so that it's clear diversity in this stakeholders list and where all, what all roles each stakeholders play. And in these partnerships, their roles become extremely critical. So each one of those stakeholders playing out their specific role so that the partnership is wholesome and is leading to the final results that all of us are expecting. So thank you so much, Nabia, for the time and sharing the thoughts today on such an important topic and helping our viewers understand the benefits of the partnerships and the need for it. We hope our viewers enjoyed the session, and we'll be back soon with the next masterclass of the series. Thank you so much for your time today.